Hi! Welcome to the pilot episode of Art Cafe Podcast, a show dedicated to analyzing different arts around the world. I am Ira Torres, your host for today. I have here with me today four incredible guests slash co-hosts. Kindly introduce yourselves first. How are you guys feeling in the middle of the pandemic?
Hello everyone, I am Rjeanoa Paragas and so far I'm doing good and thankfully COVID-19 free. Right now I'm actually one of those privileged enough to have the time to entertain myself while watching different plays. Kasi due to COVID-19, a lot of performances that I watched became available online and for everyone. One of those is El Bimbo, which trended for a while on Twitter, so I guess it's not just me. How about you, Ricca?
Hi, I'm Ricca Chiong. I agree with Ryan. With these art being made accessible for everyone to appreciate, it became an opportunity to showcase our local theaters and how talented our artists are. Hopefully, after this pandemic, we will see more people coming to watch it live. How about you, Lyssa?
Hi, I'm Lyssa Ballesteros, and just to continue, I think it being trending is an indication that Filipinos are really interested in performance arts, but it is underappreciated because of its inaccessibility. Actually, a friend of mine told me that she has never attended a play that costs less than 100 pesos, and I think that plays a large factor. How about you, Clearly?
Hi, I'm Maria Clearly de Guzman, and I agree with you, Liza, but it's also tricky. Performance art is art, and of course, it uses a lot of materials. Also, the talent and effort that our artists give cannot be underappreciated from being underpaid. With that, I believe support from the government is important. After all, art is one way of enriching our culture, right?
Of course.
How about you, Ira? How's it going?
I'm good. So we're off to a good start, and I'm actually excited about our topic for today. Just like what you said, a lot of plays became available online. So we are going to talk about one of these plays, and I think it tackles something that majority of us can relate to. So let's start with the question. So let's say 8 to 10 years from now and you have your own kids, would you raise them the same way your parents raised you?
Grabe ha, to assume I won't grow old alone. I think I'm gonna be single for the rest of my life. You first, Isabel.
So I would say 50-50. There are aspects of it that I don't really like, especially the use of violence. To be honest, I think that type of punishment instilled fear in me. I remember being hit with a belt, a stick, and a hanger. And the worst part is, I don't even remember why they do that. So I guess it's not that effective. On the other hand though, they still taught me a lot of values I would not have learned elsewhere. So how about you?
Actually, same. So my grandma kasi, she used to hit me with slippers and I probably won't do the same. I don't want to put violence in disciplining them, for them to have the mindset that violence is a way of someone to show love. I already heard the phrase, pinalo kita kasi mahal kita, a lot of times. And for me, it's such a toxic message and gives way for domestic violence to be tolerated or justified in their future. Still, discipline is important because I want to raise someone who has values. So I'll probably find another way to do that.
As for me, I believe that explaining to a child what he or she did wrong is more effective than physical punishment. Even though it was very rare for me to be spanked, as I look back, I would have preferred if the disciplining was done through having a conversation instead.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Violence is never an option. Even if you look at different angles of the situation, it's still problematic. Especially when it comes to children, because violence has lifelong impacts to them. I myself experienced and is still experiencing maltreatment from my parents, and it just really affected my mental health.
Me, I very much agree with a lot of things my parents do. So I really wouldn't consider it a bad thing to emulate their style. They're not the authoritarian type, but they're still pretty strict. They would give us certain rules and explain to us the importance of following them. They would sometimes get angry at us when we don't abide by their rules, but they would still talk to us in a calm and understanding manner, ensuring that we understand where each other is coming from. And upon hearing your answers, I think this method of discipline is more effective.
Interesting points shared. Thank you guys for sharing, and I'm sure our audience have similar or maybe different experiences too. So, moving on, today we are going to discuss a play presented by the Philippine Educational Theater Association. It is entitled Rated PG.
Didn't they have a show way back in 2010?
Yes, they did. We are fortunate enough to be able to watch the play for free on PETA's YouTube channel. I heard that they made it available for streaming on the Mother's Day.
What a perfect gift for mothers. The play is written by Lyssa Ballesteros, right?
Magtoto. Her name sounds familiar. Did she win 2 Palanca Awards?
You're actually both right.
So we have an award-winning playwright who collaborated with esteemed director May Quesada Medina and prominent composer Vincent Jesus. Now we're sure this is a play worth our time.
Indeed, Rated PG is actually a Filipino play promoting positive discipline and how this method actually helps in bringing a harmonious relationship between a parent and a child.
Like the title suggests, rated PG, parental
Exactly.
guidance.
Yeah, I think it would be better if we provide more background about the play for our listeners or viewers who haven't watched it.
Okay, sure. So, Rated PG, as I mentioned earlier, is a Filipino play promoting positive discipline. In this play, we find Giselle, played by Stella Cañete Mendoza, a hardworking multitasking mother who decides to work abroad in hopes of providing more for her family and securing a good future for her children. Her loving husband, Romy, played by Gilbert Ernida, is almost always preoccupied with his job and leaves the children's moral upbringing to his wife. Giselle tries to delegate tasks to her teenage daughter Rosalie, who was played by Joan Bugcat, who however has her own concerns. The family's youngest member, Tonton, played by Arthur Castro, is a playful child who, like most kids, often get into trouble. Through several situations, Giselle and Romy experiment with different ways of instilling discipline in their children. So first, let us talk about the visuals of the play and its intricacies.
Props, stage design, and costumes, even the script, it all points to the family being a representation of the common Filipino families.
I agree. Actually, the script, specifically the language used, also indicates to who the characters are, which is the common Filipino household. The use of Taglish and Filipino slang words made the play more relatable since we use them in our everyday lives. The occasional grammatical errors from Inday also adds to that indication. This made it relatable, along with the phrases that we've already heard from our parents, such as sabon na sile, or them saying they do that because they love us and they want us to be disciplined.
Exactly. I felt like I could relate to it to a certain degree, especially when the mothers also used the sweep and chinelas to tell their child off.
Indeed, the stage design also indicates that. For example, you can see that there are structures that are made of wood and pieced together roughly. In real life, we usually see these underdeveloped neighborhoods or areas. The design of the house is also very Filipino. From the religious calendar to wooden furnitures, the houses were also close together. And I like how it showed the typical Filipino setting, where a sense of community is present. In a way, it brought more intimacy.
I agree. It was effective, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It allowed the audience to relate to it because that is the setting they grew up in. Personally, it was nice because it really captured the typical Filipino community setting, which is simple. The people who were there were actually the ones who livened up the stage.
Yes, the typical chismosas were there, casually talking outside of the house. There are lots of kids also. Very Filipino. The stage design makes us reminisce about our own homes. Can you guys comment on the costume design as well?
As for their wardrobe, we see them in costumes that the typical mother usually wears, especially those in a working class, such as the dusters. So we can also look at the colors. For example, the yellow dress of the lady in the first scene who disapproves of the violent method of disciplining. Yellow, it usually means positivity, and that reflects to the character who prefers a positive way of disciplining.
I agree. Another example is Inday, who wore a pink blouse and a floral skirt. From there, even without seeing her accessories, we can say she is very girly because pink and flowers are usually associated with femininity. You can also infer that she has a bright personality because of her color preference.
The style is also important. So notice that in the scene where there was a woman complaining about the mother screams her children every day, the woman's outfit is very baguettes, with a dress and a denim jacket on compared to the mother's. So this could signify that her ideas are progressive or modern in terms of parenting, which fits because she is against the use of violence and disciplining the child. Same goes with Aunt Nova, who has a colorful dress with sparkly belt and accessories. It's very baguettes. And then it was revealed that she's a cool mom who listens and communicates her children without shouting, which is, it's very different from the traditional one.
Oh, since we talked about colors, what do you think about the lighting clearly?
The lighting can also signify something or enhance the emotion of the scene. So in one of those scenes, the lighting went red, which signifies love. Appropriate as that part is where the mother affectionately comforted her son. It is also used in the musical parts to make it livelier. The lighting can also say the time or location of the scene. This was utilized when it acted as a cue for a memory or a flashback, like, Giselle's to her mother.
Right. So those are the parts that where they let us see the thought process of the mother. Not really the thought process of the mother, but the mom who occasionally appears whenever Giselle is angry or frustrated about her kids.
I noticed that too, and I think it's significant because earlier the mother actually told his husband that she didn't want to become like her mother. She was traumatized when she was a kid.
Notice how it was not as bright, but the focus goes to the grandmother whenever she appears? This is a way to signify to the audience that it was only a memory, but significant enough for Giselle to have her full attention to the story.
It is amazing to think that everything was carefully chosen to deliver its intended meaning, which also includes the props that were used.
Exactly. The props used, such as the hanger, slippers, cart, and many more, were very unique to a Filipino setting.
So, as some of you have mentioned, the play is reflective of many Filipino cultures and values. Filipinos, for example, place high regard and put importance on their family before anything else. They work all day and do all they can to feed and provide for their families, like Giselle, the mother, and Romy, the father who worked multiple jobs.
And it's also not surprising that Giselle accepted the offer to work abroad because for many decades, millions of Filipinos have been leaving the country to escape unemployment, low wages, and limited opportunities. And those who are diaspora or the OFWs are called bagong bayani or new heroes for sacrificing themselves for the betterment of their families.
The play also reflects our culture of extending familial bonds with those who are outside our bloodline. Giselle and her neighbors, and Rosalie and her friends, for example, treat each other like family.
Many Filipinos also hold the belief that each family member has several duties and responsibilities they must uphold, and observing one's duties and responsibilities is important to ensure harmony among family members. The eldest child, Rosalie, for example, is always expected to be the responsible one.
And lastly, and I think most importantly, the play demonstrates the common child-rearing practices in the Philippines. So these practices often involve physical punishments and or humiliating treatments.
So, in the Philippines, or I think Asia in general, physical punishment is something that we commonly see as an instrument in disciplining children. Am I right? Have you guys ever experienced being physically punished when you were a kid?
The scene where Giselle spanks the bottom of Tonton with what seems like a ladle is a scene that I haven't seen that in years, but it's so familiar to me because I was raised by my grandma because my mom is working. So as a child, I would get spanked by her with slippers, and it's really painful because she has what you call mabigat na kamay. But that became less frequent as I grew. Meanwhile, my mom is not the palo type, but her palo is a mere tapik, but she has a disapproving look and voice that's scarier.
When I was a kid, I also got a palo or slight kurot almost every day because I was really a naughty kid. Not a pleasant experience, I may add, but it still actually happens up to this day because they're very strict and I've grown to become a strong-headed person.
I actually share the same sentiment with you clearly. Back in the days, I remember being spanked because it was my parents' way of disciplining me.
As for me, I've never really had a memory of being hit by my parents, but I'm well aware of the fact that physical or corporal punishments account for the majority of child-rearing practices in the Philippines, especially in the domestic space as you guys have experienced. The scenes, or some of the scenes, though I haven't really experienced them, are very familiar, not just to me, but to most Filipinos, I guess.
Yes, and that's actually because we are not strangers to corporal punishment. It has been so ingrained in our cultural fabric, and we've long accepted it as normal. In fact, many Filipinos regard chinelas as a symbol of discipline and punishment.
Exactly. I don't know if many parents still hit their children, but I'm pretty sure we've been so well conditioned to fear that sometimes parents no longer need to actually take their slippers off their feet. The sudden movement of bending forward and reaching towards the foot already incites a sudden adrenaline rush in us.
In a sense, physical punishment in the use of chinelas has become an important aspect of disciplinary strategies of Filipino parents. But corporal punishment is not just about the chinelas, right?
Yes, there are many forms of physical punishment. It may be spanking with hand, pinching, hitting with an object, twisting a child's ear, pulling their hair, slapping the face or head, or maybe confinement in a sack, and many others. Some also experience humiliation, such as being shouted at in front of others, labeling, or denigration.
You know what I find most interesting is the casualness and even sentimentality of physical punishments when it's discussed in cultures where it's prevalent. For example, my parents, titos and titas who grew up under the reign of chinelas, they actually consider it a thing to laugh about. You know, my tito, he used to have broken because my lola threw a soap holder at him, and now he just laughs about it.
Right. Adults don't seem to take it seriously. As they say nga, hindi kompleto ang childhood mo kung hindi ka napalo. They actually considered palo as something that is necessary in molding their children to be stronger.
I agree, but the parents of Tonton seem to have contrasting views when it comes to disciplining their children, right?
Well, both of their parents are based on their personal experiences.
I agree. The father narrates that he started to respect his elders because his parents would let him eat soap whenever he disrespected them.
On the other hand, the mother shared that she is scared of playing sack race because of the trauma that she had when her mother put her inside a sack to discipline her.
Well, that's probably why the culture of physical punishment continues. Parents like the father who were physically abused tend to use the same disciplinary strategies to their own children.
Right, but what they don't understand is that not all children would have the same reaction to physical punishment. If it worked for them or if they think that physical punishment is effective, then they have to realize that it's not the case for everyone. The mother, Giselle, for example, is still traumatized and still haunted by the not so pleasant memories of her childhood.
You're right. Even the father admits that he couldn't remember what his parents taught him or disciplined him for. All he remembers is the punishment itself.
I also noticed that physical and or verbal abuse happens not only in domestic space but also in schools. So the teachers, in the play, they would often shout at the disobeying children, ask them to do squats, and even hit them as a punishment.
I agree. And the children, upon seeing the normalization of these physical or verbal punishments, often imitate them. Like Tonton, who gets into fight with his classmates, and even sometimes talks back with his parents. In a sense, it promotes the idea that violence is unacceptable behavior and is a solution to problems.
It seems like physical punishment is really
Right. Instead of discipline, what is instilled in children is fear. Sometimes they even get traumatized, just like what happened to Giselle. Humiliating treatments also result in low self-esteem, and if the child gets constantly punished, they might develop resentment or anger towards their parents.
Like what happened to Rosalie.
Right, there's a scene where Giselle gets angry at Rosalie because she spends too much time with her friends and often forgets to do her chores. And instead of talking to her calmly, Giselle gets carried away by her anger and slaps her. She also didn't allow Rosalie to participate in the dance competition, which she worked hard for. As a result, Rosalie drifts away from her mother.
However, in the defense of the parents, it's not really their intention to damage our self-esteem. Parents often admit that they feel guilty and sorry about punishing their children.
but they are not aware of any other way of disciplining children except for what they have learned from their own parents and grandparents.
That's right. However, the parents' views align during the latter part, right?
Yes, they realize that children are not the only ones who should apologize to their parents.
Indeed, parents can also learn to apologize when they have done something hurtful. Moreover, adults should understand that children will learn better if their parents and/or teachers talk to them in a calm and understanding manner.
Right. And I also believe that it's important to break the stereotype that only the children should apologize to their parents. And yes, instead of resorting to physical or verbal punishment, adults should learn to explain to their children what they have done wrong or how they should do things the right way and make them feel that they are still loved and accepted.
In the end, the family was able to settle their differences through constant communication.
From there, we can see how the play's topic is relevant to our country. It criticizes our culture of parenting. We can even say that the play is daring and ready to take on the disagreement that may come from the parents who will watch this. After all, the bill that prohibited palo to children gained a lot of controversy here in the Philippines. Do you guys still remember how your parents or guardian reacted to that law?
Based on my research, corporal punishment is prohibited in public and private schools. It is also unlawful as a disciplinary measure in penal institutions. In homes, however, I'm not sure if there's a law that prohibits it.
Actually, since 2007, a number of bills which would prohibit corporal punishment have been introduced to the parliament but have failed to progress through both houses.
So, corporal punishment still lawful in the home?
I guess so. So there are actually a number of legal defenses for the use of corporal punishment in child rearing. So, for example, the Family Code of 1987 recognized the right and duty of those with parental authority over children to impose discipline on them as may be required under the circumstances.
That's right. Child and Youth Welfare Code of 1974 also recognizes the right of parents to discipline the child as may be necessary for the formation of his good character.
In addition, the rules and regulations on the reporting and investigation of child abuse cases states that discipline administered by a parent or legal guardian to a child does not constitute cruelty, provided it is reasonable in manner, moderate in degree, and does not constitute physical or psychological injury.
Yeah, and even the president believes that corporal punishment is an effective way of disciplining children. That is why he vetoed a bill banning this practice.
Well, I've heard about it. On February last year, President Duterte returned to Congress the positive and non-violent discipline law without his signature, thereby vetoing the bill.
Pretty sure lots of traditional parents would agree with him.
My grandma actually does. For them, physical punishment is still the best form of punishment. One time there was news about it and she said, paano matututo yung bata pag di pinapalo? And then proceeded to guilt trip us by asking, gusto niyo ba makulong? Gusto niyo ba ako makulong? Sino mag-aalaga sa inyo?
Yeah, in a Facebook post by Rappler last year actually, netizens argued on whether physical or verbal punishment was more effective in disciplining children. And one user stated that setting a good example for one's children should suffice. If children follow you only because they are scared, then that is not discipline, he said.
Right. On the other hand, several users felt that physical punishment was the best way to go. According to them, children who were physically punished were more disciplined and obedient, whereas children who were spared from such punishment were more disrespectful.
The issue of using physical punishment at home has been a long-standing issue in Filipino culture. Many Filipinos like Wilma, the mother in the play who regularly hits her children and shouts at them, still believe it's necessary.
That's why it's important to engage Filipinos in a discussion, challenge their old ways in rearing children, and urge them to adopt positive discipline in homes.
I agree. So, we can say that the play has done an excellent job in sending its message across by making their productions so familiar and so relevant to us.
I think Rated PG has done an impressive job of exploring positive discipline.
Right. So, we had such an insightful discussion today. Thank you, Ryan, Rika, Lyssa, and Clearly. I hope we can continue to have discussion like these. We will actually. Next week, we will be talking about the play Twelfth Night, written by none other than William Shakespeare and directed by Emma Rice. Expect love triangles, cross-dressing, a drag queen, and a Shakespearean purist drama.
Yay!
Yay!